The wind rattled the brothel walls like angry fists on a coffin lid. Outside, Deadwood's sky churned with ice and ash, and inside the iron lily heat pressed in thick with whiskey breath, cigar smoke, and the sour perfume of lost dreams. Laughter clattered above the ragged piano tune, masking the cruelty that simmered just beneath. In a dim corner booth, a man slammed his fist against the sticky wood. "Where the hell is she?" he barked, half-rising belt unbuckled and boots crusted with road mud. "I paid an hour ago." A woman in a frayed crimson corset approached him with a smile stretched too tight. "She'll be out in just a bit, sugar. She's feeling a little sick again," he snapped. "Tired, dizzy." His laugh was thick with scorn. "She's a goddamn ghost." Behind a tattered velvet curtain, Lila Brooks pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her own ribs through the thin shift. Her skin glistened with sweat despite the cold air seeping through the warped floorboards. A bloody rag trembled in her fingers. The coughing hadn't stopped since sunrise, and her breath now came in wheezes sharp and shallow. "You go out there or I'll drag you by the hair," hissed a voice behind her. It was Mabel Crick, Madam of the Iron Lily, and her voice sounded like broken glass dragged over gravel. "Think those men are here to watch you die slow? You're lucky I let you stay, girl." "I can't," Lila whispered, her voice barely a thread. A crack echoed through the tiny back room as Mabel's hand struck her. Lila stumbled against the vanity, catching herself just before falling. Blood smeared across her palm, bright against the white rag that slipped to the floor. "Maybe you're not worth feeding any more," Mabel growled, curling her lip. "That what you want, to rot in a ditch." The shouting in the saloon grew louder, the customer now hurling a whiskey glass against the wall, its shatter lost in the swell of voices. In the shadows, near the hearth, sat a man cloaked in a black wool coat dusted in snow. His dark eyes tracked every movement, sharp and quiet as a hunting cat. He hadn't touched his drink in nearly an hour. His name was Jesse Calder. He hadn't come to Deadwood looking for trouble, but he'd known as soon as he stepped off his horse that this town reeked of it. He watched the scene unfold with a soldier's stillness, one hand resting against the table's edge. Then the curtain tore back, and Mabel lunged for Lila, fingers curled like claws. That's when Jesse moved. No one noticed until he was already between them. "You planned to kill her in front of a crowd." His voice was low and steady, but there was iron beneath it. Mabel blinked, startled. "Excuse me." He looked down at Lila. Her mouth was cracked, her eyes glassy with fever. She lay crumpled on the wooden floor like a discarded doll. "I said," Jesse repeated, locking eyes with the madam. "Are you planning to kill her?" The brothel fell silent. Even the drunk at the bar paused, glass halfway to his lips. "She's none of your concern," Mabel sneered. "She's mine. Not anymore." From beneath his coat, Jesse pulled a thick roll of bills and dropped it onto the counter with a solid thump. "That cover her." Mabel stared at the money, her jaw clenching. "You're buying her. I'm taking her." She opened her mouth to protest, but Jesse's stare silenced her. There was something buried in his eyes, something worn and wild that made even the toughest saloon thugs look away. Without another word, he stooped and gathered Lila into his arms. She didn't resist. Couldn't. Her head slumped against his shoulder, lips dry, her breath brushing against his collarbone in faint pulses. Jesse turned toward the door. The wind blasted through the saloon as he stepped out, the door creaking open behind him. Snow swallowed them fast, the hiss of hooves and creak of leather fading into the storm. Nobody followed. They wouldn't dare. The blizzard thickened as Jesse guided his mare up the frozen trail, the sky turning a bruised purple above the tree line. Lila lay draped across the saddle in front of him, blanketed in an old horse-wool wrap. Her body felt feather-light bones too close to the surface. He held her steady with one arm as they rode deeper into the woods. She stirred once. "Please, not back," she mumbled, her voice raw and frightened. "You're not going back," Jesse answered, unsure if she heard him. "Not ever." The road up the ridge twisted through tall pines heavy with snow. His mare picked her way carefully, hooves crunching through frost and rock. Jesse had carried bodies like this before, boys with uniforms too big and boots too loose, men who died whispering home. He had once sworn never to lift another weapon, never to carry another soul toward death. But now he carried her, and for the first time since the war, he didn't feel like he was running. By dusk, they reached a small clearing on the ridge. Nestled among the snow-laden trees stood a cabin built of rough-hewn logs, its roof slightly sagging but sturdy. Smoke curled faint from the chimney like a tired breath. He slid down from the saddle, then lifted Lila carefully, pressing her to his chest. Her breath was still there, soft and warm against his neck, but faint. Inside the cabin was cold and dim. Jesse laid her gently on the cot by the window, then went to work building the fire, stoking it with pine shavings until golden flames licked high into the stone hearth. He removed her boots, peeled off the soaked shawl, and covered her in blankets. Then, from a wooden tin, he pulled dried herbs his mother once swore by, sage and spruce and dried chamomile. As the tea boiled, he knelt beside her. Lifting her head gently, he held the cup to her lips. "Drink," he whispered. She sipped barely, then drifted back to sleep. Outside, the wind howled. But inside, Jesse Calder sat beside the fire, watching the pale girl breathe. And for the first time in years, he let himself hope that maybe this time wasn't another ending. It was a beginning. Morning broke without color. Just a pale wash of light through the snow-crusted windows, casting soft shadows against the wooden walls. Jesse stirred the embers back to life, careful not to wake the girl still curled beneath the heavy quilt. She hadn't moved much through the night, save for the quiet, pained murmurs that escaped when fever dreams gripped her. The cabin was small. Just one open room with a lean-to kitchen in the corner, a cast-iron stove, a few shelves of books and tools, and the cot by the window where she lay. Everything inside smelled of pine smoke, and something faintly sweet like the wild meadow beyond the ridge. Jesse moved with quiet precision, boiling more water and steeping another handful of dried herbs. He kept his back to her, but listened carefully. The wheeze in her chest had eased some, but she still breathed like her lungs were brittle glass. As he poured the tea into a clay cup, he heard a rustle behind him. When he turned, she was awake barely. Her brown eyes opened in slivers, glancing around the unfamiliar space before locking onto his figure. Where am I?" Her voice was paper-thin, dry as dust. Jesse crossed the room and knelt by her side. "My cabin, up on Hawk Ridge, west of Deadwood." He offered the cup. "Try this. It'll help the cough." She hesitated. He didn't push. "I'm not going to hurt you," he added softly. She reached for the cup, hands trembling. He steadied it while she sipped just enough to wet her throat. "Thank you," she murmured, eyes still uncertain. Why'd you help me?" He paused. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he wasn't sure how to explain it. He could have said he pitied her, that he'd seen too many broken souls left behind. But the truth was simpler and heavier. "Because you looked like you'd already been left for dead, and I couldn't walk away from that." She blinked hard but didn't respond. They passed the day in near silence. Jesse cooked a thin soup of potatoes and carrots, fed her in small spoonfuls, and let her sleep. Outside, snow fell like a curtain hiding the world beyond the trees. Inside, the fire glowed warm, steady. Jesse moved through his routines, splitting wood-clearing snow from the roof, checking on his mare, but always kept her within earshot. Not hovering, just there, present, in case she needed him. That night, she cried out in her sleep, "No, don't, please don't lock the door." Jesse rushed to her side, heart pounding, her face twisted in fear, limbs flailing beneath the quilt. He knelt and gently pressed his hand to her wrist. "Lila," he said softly, "you're safe. No one's gonna hurt you here." Her eyes didn't open, but her breathing began to slow. His fingers stayed on her pulse. It trembled like a scared rabbit's heart. After a while, she quieted. Jesse didn't move. He sat beside her as the wind screamed outside, holding her wrist gently until the storm dulled to a whisper. The next morning, she was lucid. "I remember," she said hoarsely. "Your voice. You were there last night." He nodded. "You were dreaming. Sounded bad." She turned her face toward the wall, ashamed. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I was already up." A pause. I don't cry usually," she said quietly. "Not unless someone hits me." Jesse didn't flinch, but he felt it like a stone to the gut. He stirred the fire, then brought her another bowl of soup. "You don't have to explain anything. Just rest." The days bled together in white silence. Snow blanketed the world, muting sound and motion. But inside the cabin, a kind of rhythm began to take shape. Jesse never asked questions, never touched her without permission. Every morning, she found a fresh bowl of soup on the side table, her blanket folded neatly. Sometimes he left a piece of dried fruit or a square of cloth for her to wipe her brow. On the 5th day, she sat up on her own. "I should leave," she said suddenly, eyes downcast. "I'm better now. I can walk." "You're not ready," he replied without turning from the fire, "and there's nowhere to go." She didn't argue. That night, she watched him from the cot as he sat by the fire, sharpening a small wood carving knife. He wasn't whittling anything in particular, just working the blade back and forth like he needed to keep his hands busy. "You live here alone?" she asked. Jesse nodded. "No wife." A pause. "Once?" She waited, but he offered nothing else. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He looked up. His eyes met hers, the shadows from the fire dancing in their depths. "She's part of the past now, like the rest of it." Lila nodded slowly, then lay back down. Her fingers brushed the edge of the blanket he'd tucked around her earlier. That night she didn't cry. By the end of the week, Lila was up and walking shaky, slow, but upright. She even cracked a smile one morning when Jesse handed her a mug of weak coffee. "Tastes like dirt," she muttered, sipping it anyway. "Then you're finally starting to recover," Jesse said with a faint grin. Outside, the trees stood like ancient sentinels bowed under the weight of winter. Inside, a flicker of warmth had begun to grow between them, uncertain, unspoken, but real. Neither of them said the word safe. But it was there in the way he refilled her tea without asking, in the way she folded the blankets herself now, in the silence that no longer felt empty. And for the first time in years, neither of them was alone. By the second week, the snow began to ease, lifting its thick white veil just enough to show the shape of distant hills and the dark spines of evergreens. Lila stood at the window most mornings now, hands cradling the chipped mug Jesse had given her. She watched the woods in silence as though expecting something to come out of them, either from memory or fate. She moved slowly but steadily around the cabin, swept the floor, washed the cups, tended to the hearth. Small things almost imperceptible, but each one reclaiming a part of herself. Jesse watched from a respectful distance, never interfering. His days remained simple, chopping wood, boiling water, mending traps. He spoke little, but there was no coldness in it, just the quiet rhythm of a man used to his own company. But on the third Sunday morning, Lila found a photograph tucked behind a brass lantern on the shelf. Dust clung to the frame like a memory left too long untouched. Inside it was a picture faded and grainy of a woman in a white summer dress standing beside a young Jesse. She was radiant, full of laughter. He looked serious but calm. She held the photo gently. "She's beautiful," Lila murmured. Jesse didn't glance up from where he sat, sewing a tear in the horse blanket. She was. "I'm sorry." He nodded, said nothing else. That night, the silence between them felt heavier. Not tense, just full of words not yet spoken. Lila lay under her blanket, staring at the ceiling, letting the fire's shadows play across the walls like ghosts dancing. She rolled over and watched him for a long time. "I had a husband once," she said. Jesse, still carving wood, paused and looked up. "David. We were married for just under 2 years. He worked in the Elkhorn mines." Her voice faltered, but she didn't stop. "I begged him to quit. Told him it wasn't safe, but he said we needed the money. The gas explosion happened mid-shift." She took a breath, held it, and let it shiver out through her fingers. "They told me he died fast. I didn't believe them, and even if he did, the rest didn't go fast. Losing the home, the savings, the future." Jesse set the carving knife down. His eyes never left her. "I couldn't find work, couldn't pay rent. Then some man told me he had a job for me, said it'd be easy money, that it was just serving drinks. I didn't know what kind of place it was until the doors locked behind me. After that, no one ever let me leave." She didn't cry, but her jaw tightened and her hands twisted the edge of her blanket until her knuckles went white. "I got sick. I thought maybe it was a blessing. Maybe I'd just fade out." Jesse stood crossed to the stove and poured her another cup of the herbal tea she'd come to tolerate. He set it on the table beside her. "I don't believe in mercy like that," he said quietly. "Not the kind that kills you." She looked up, startled. He met her gaze and didn't look away. "There's nothing noble in disappearing," he added. "There's still something in you worth keeping." That night, something shifted. They didn't talk more than usual, didn't sit closer, but their silences began to carry something softer. When she moved around the cabin, he handed her tools without asking. When he chopped wood, she stood on the porch and watched with a faint smile. One morning, she caught him staring at her while she stirred the soup. What she asked amused. "Nothing, just glad to see you upright." She smirked. "Well, I'll try not to collapse any time soon." Later that week, he showed her how to scatter feed the chickens, how to check the traps without injuring the animals, how to spot where the sun would rise over the ridge. These weren't lessons given, they were shared. One step at a time, side by side. Most mornings they drank coffee on the porch, bundled in old wool coats and watching the fog crawl through the pines. Lila would hold her mug with both hands like it was an anchor. "I used to hate coffee," she said one morning. "You still do," Jesse replied. She laughed softly. "Maybe. I like the way it feels, warm." One evening, while mending the seam of her shawl, she asked him, "Why did you come west?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, slowly, I fought in the war. For the South. Joined when I was 17. Didn't know what I was fighting for until it was too late." Lila sat very still. "I saw things I can't forget. Did things I won't defend. When it ended, I didn't want to be someone's son anymore. I didn't think I deserved to be." He didn't look at her when he said it. Just kept polishing the blade of the carving knife. "So I rode west. Figured the quiet would be punishment enough." She didn't try to fix it, didn't offer comfort, just sat beside him. You ever feel like your whole life got decided without you? She asked after a while. All the time. She turned toward him, her voice trembling but honest. I stopped looking in mirrors. I forgot what my own voice sounded like. I wasn't me anymore. He looked up and the firelight caught the sadness in his eyes. But there was something else there, too. Something gentle. If I could choose again, he said slowly, knowing what I know now, I'd still carry you out of that place. Lila's lips parted, but no sound came. She didn't need words, because in that moment, for the first time since her husband's death, she believed someone saw her not as damaged, not as debt, but as something still worthy. The wind howled beyond the cabin walls, but neither of them flinched. They just sat together, shoulder to shoulder, surrounded by pine and firelight, and a silence that had finally become something like peace. Snow still blanketed the ridge, but now it lay like a hush, not a threat. The worst of the storms had passed, leaving behind a world muffled in white, the kind of quiet that made your own heartbeat sound louder. Inside the cabin, warmth had become a habit fire in the hearth soup, on the stove a second quilt now folded at the foot of Lila's cot. She no longer flinched when Jessie passed behind her, no longer asked if she was allowed to eat or move or speak. She had even begun to hum while washing dishes, soft shy notes from some forgotten lullaby. But peace never lasts where profit is involved. Back in Deadwood, the iron lily burned with gossip. Mabel Crick seethed behind her painted face, slamming shot glasses harder than necessary, her voice a rasping curse. She was mine, she spat. That bastard stole her. No one responded, but the whispers caught wind. By week's end, a sign went up in the back of the general store. Reward $50 for return of runaway girl, female, mid-20s, pale skin, brown hair, sickly, valuable. No name, just a price. That was enough for Hank Mercer. Once a bounty hunter, now a drifter with debts thicker than his neck and a taste for violence, Hank didn't ask why a sick girl was worth $50. He didn't care. He had tracked worse in deeper snow. All he needed was a general direction, and greed always found a trail. He rode out before dawn with nothing but his revolver, a length of coarse rope, and the crumpled flyer stuffed into his coat. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered Lila. He'd seen her once in Deadwood before her eyes turned hollow. He told himself this was just another job. The trees thickened as he rode north, hooves crunching ice along half-forgotten paths. He found a trapper who swore he'd seen a man and a woman heading into the hills during the storm. Later, Mercer spotted a discarded rag near a frozen creek, stiff with dried blood. Then he saw it a single thread of gray smoke curling above the pines, a signal as plain as a flag. He smiled, adjusted the gun at his hip, and urged his horse forward. Miles away, Jessie was splitting wood. The axe rose and fell in steady rhythm, each log stacking with deliberate care. The mare nickered softly from the stable. Behind him, the cabin stood quiet smoke, drifting lazily into the cold blue sky. Then he paused. One boot print, not his. Another near the fence, too deep, too fresh. Jesse's eyes narrowed. His hand went to the axe, not out of panic but instinct, a muscle memory carved by war and survival. The forest had gone quiet. No birds, no squirrels, the kind of silence that came before gunfire. He set the axe down, went inside. Lila was kneeling by the hearth, stirring a pot of bean stew. She looked up and smiled softly, contentment settling across her features like sunlight. "Don't go outside," Jesse said, voice low. She blinked. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He moved to the door, loaded the shotgun, then checked the revolver hidden in the cabinet drawer. His hands moved with precision. No panic, just preparation. Is it wolves? She asked, standing now, alarm creeping into her voice. Something worse. She stepped closer, but didn't press him. Instead, she locked the front window herself. They didn't speak again for a long time. Outside, the snowfall had begun again, soft and slow, like a lie whispered in your ear. Somewhere beyond the tree line, Hank Mercer watched the cabin through frost-laced branches. His breath fogged the scope of his rifle. A coil of rope hung from his saddle. He'd wait until dark. Quieter that way. Inside, Lila stood in the doorway, watching Jesse at the table. He sat, cleaning a long-barreled rifle. She had never seen him use his hands, slow, methodical. Bullets lined up on a cloth beside him, their brass glinting in the firelight. She stepped forward. "You've done this before." He didn't look up. Too many times. She studied his face, the quiet grimness, the old pain etched into the corners of his eyes. "Did you ever kill anyone?" The scraping of the whetstone stopped. "Yes." She waited. "I fought for the South," he said at last. "Joined when I was 17. Thought it was about pride, family, protecting what we had. That's what they told us." He sat back, eyes fixed on the fire. But it wasn't pride. It was power. And by the time I figured that out, I'd already buried good men. Boys, really. A father trying to get home. A kid who couldn't grow a beard. Lila sat across from him, arms crossed, not defensively, but as if holding herself steady. "Is that why you never carry a gun?" He nodded. Swore never again. Not unless someone's life depended on it. She swallowed hard. "You're not the only one who lost themselves." Jesse looked up, his expression softening. "I used to be a wife," she said, her voice cracking. "I used to sing while I cooked. I used to dream about a house with a red porch and roses in the yard. Then I became just a body in a locked room, a name no one used." Her voice broke tears threatening. She wiped them away fast, almost angry at herself. "I didn't know who I was anymore until you brought me here." Silence wrapped around them, but this time it was full of understanding, not fear. Jesse rose, walked to her, and stopped a breath away. "If I could choose again," he said softly. "If I could ride into that town, knowing everything I know now, I'd still carry you out." Lila's breath caught. She didn't speak, because she didn't have to. In his voice, steady and low, she heard the truth she had waited her whole life to believe. She was not a mistake, not broken, not a burden. She was worth choosing, and someone had. The snow came heavier now, cloaking the pines in thick silence. It covered tracks, swallowed sound, and dimmed the stars above like a woolen shroud. Inside the cabin, the fire was a golden heart beating in the center of the room, throwing shadows against log walls, dancing over Jesse's worn face. He sat on the edge of the cot, polishing the rifle with care, each bullet reshaped by hand. The smooth rhythm calmed him at least more than the rising dread in his gut. He hadn't told Lila everything, about what it felt like to pull a trigger and watch a man drop, about how it stayed with you long after the gun was gone, long after the war. He hadn't wanted her to see that part of him, but now it was coming. That night, the wind died completely. The kind of stillness that didn't feel like peace, the kind that told you something was holding its breath just before it lunged. Lila slept soundly, curled beneath the quilt, her breathing slow and even. Her lips parted slightly, one hand resting near her chest. Jesse watched her from the table rifle across his lap fingers, drumming slow against the wood. She had come so far, from bone-thin and bloodied to someone who could laugh, who could look you in the eye without flinching, who had finally stopped apologizing for breathing. And someone wanted to take that from her. He wouldn't allow it, but even he couldn't stop everything. The door creaked open. A shadow slipped inside. Hank Mercer moved like fog, quiet, practiced. His boots made no sound against the floorboards. The rifle across his back remained untouched. He preferred silence, preferred control. A fist, a rope, a whispered threat. He found her easily, yanked the quilt aside, clamped a hand over her mouth before she could scream. She thrashed, but she was still recovering, still underweight, still too tired. He tied her wrists fast with a thick rope, muttering under his breath. $50, sweetheart, he hissed. Just for being alive? Imagine that. Lila kicked, trying to scream, but his grip was steel. When she managed to bite him, he slapped her hard. Her head snapped to the side, blood at the corner of her mouth. You'll wish you hadn't done that. He hauled her up and dragged her toward the door. That's when it opened again. Jesse stood there, snow still dusting his shoulders, rifle already raised. His eyes locked on Lila, first bound, bleeding, terrified. Then on Mercer. Let her go, he said. Mercer turned surprised but not afraid. Well, hell, didn't expect you back so soon. He tightened his grip on Lila. Thought you were just some lonely fool. Guess I was wrong. Jesse stepped forward, kicked the door shut behind him. The fire roared behind him like it understood the moment. I said, let her go. Mercer didn't. Instead, he dragged her in front of him, hand now at her throat. You want her, pay the price. Otherwise, I take her back to Deadwood and no one sees her again. Jesse's hands shook. The rifle trembled in his grip, not from fear, but from memory. The boy who didn't cry until the bullet hit. The smoke in the trees, the smell of blood soaked into mud, the screams. He couldn't move. Shoot him, Lila sobbed. Please, Jesse. But his body locked. The ghosts came back all at once. Mercer sneered. You don't have it in you, cowboy. I can see it. You're soft now. Rusted. Lila turned her head, eyes blazing, her voice raw but strong. If you hadn't come for me that night, I'd be dead. You saved me not because you had to, because you chose to. She stared at him through the shaking hands and the ghosts. I choose you, she said. Right now, I choose you. Jesse exhaled, and the world went still. The rifle cracked. Mercer stumbled backward, eyes wide. A red bloom spread across his chest like a flower made of fire. He dropped to his knees, then fell forward into the snow face first. Silence. Lila collapsed to the floor, gasping, sobbing. The rope still cut into her wrists. Jesse dropped the gun. His knees buckled. He sank to the ground, shaking so hard he couldn't see straight. It wasn't war this time, but it felt the same. Fire, blood, a body on the floor, his hands red again. He couldn't breathe. Lila crawled to him, hands still bound, and pressed her forehead to his. It's over, she whispered. He's gone. You saved me. But Jesse didn't respond. Couldn't. His eyes stared into the flames unblinking, and in the glow of the firelight, he wasn't in the cabin anymore. He was in the woods again, surrounded by death, lost. It took hours for the shaking to stop. She never left his side. Outside, the snow had begun to melt reluctantly, loosening its grip on the mountain. The air smelled different now, like ash and pine, and something new. Inside the cabin held its silence like a prayer. Jesse had broken his vow, and in doing so maybe saved more than her, maybe saved them both. Spring did not arrive in a grand gesture. It came slowly, quietly, one thawed root at a time. A trickle of meltwater down the hill. The distant call of birds that hadn't sung all winter. Pale green shoots pushing up through frost-hardened soil, timid but persistent. At Jesse's cabin, the world changed in small ways. He straightened the sagging porch beam, replaced the broken shutter, fixed the stovepipe so it didn't rattle when the wind rose. Lila began opening the windows each morning, letting in light and the scent of pine. She planted wildflowers, daisies, sage, and something yellow she couldn't name, but loved for how bold it looked against the gray bark of the forest. Jesse still spoke little, but his silence had softened. He no longer kept his back to the wall, no longer flinched when she reached for his hand, and when he woke at night with sweat on his brow and the ghosts clawing through his ribs, he let her take his hand and hold it until his breath came back. He never said thank you. He didn't need to. One afternoon, Lila sat at the table writing a letter she would never send. A letter to the woman she used to be. I thought I'd been ruined. I thought I had nothing left to give. But I was wrong. There is a man who saw me not for what I had lost, but for what I still carried. He gave me food when I was starving a bed when I was broken. But more than that, he gave me back myself. Some hearts don't come perfect. They come cracked and bruised like doors left open too long to the storm. But the ones who stay, the ones who see the cracks and still call them beautiful, those are the ones who matter. She folded the letter and placed it beneath a loose floorboard by her bed just to know it was there. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Jesse and Lila sat on the cabin steps. The sky was painted in ribbons of amber and dusty rose. The birds were louder now, the air warmer, the world somehow gentler. "You never ask me what I want," Lila said quietly. Jesse turned to her brow furrowed slightly. "What do you want?" She smiled and took his hand. "I want to stay," she said. "Not because I owe you, not because I've got nowhere else to go, but because this is the only place I've ever felt like I wasn't just surviving." Jesse didn't answer with words. He turned fully to her, placed her hand gently against his chest. "You feel that?" she asked. He nodded. "It still beats," she whispered. "Even after the war, after the blood, after everything, it still beats. And now it beats for me." Something in his expression shifted, like a door cracking open, just enough to let light in. He leaned forward, rested his forehead against hers, and let himself be seen. They stayed that way for a long time. Weeks passed. The wild mustard bloomed across the field beyond the cabin, turning the hill gold beneath the sun. One morning, Jesse took her hand as they stood near the porch. He placed something small and warm into her palm. It was a ring, forged from an old silver coin, polished and simple. No jewels, but it caught the sunlight like fire. He didn't get down on one knee, didn't say a speech. He just looked at her and said, "I, who once thought I was beyond forgiveness, choose you. Not because you needed saving, but because you saved me." Lila, tears on her lashes, smiled so wide it hurt. "I choose this life," she whispered, "with all its scars, with all its mourning, with you." They said their vows alone, just the two of them. No audience but the wind, the trees, and the birds overhead. No pastor, no papers. Just two people who had come through fire and snow and still found each other. When they kissed, it wasn't eager. It wasn't desperate. It was home. He pulled her into his arms like she was the only shelter he'd ever need. And she clung to him like the ground beneath her feet had finally stopped shifting. From that day on, the cabin was no longer a place of survival. It was a place of beginning. It didn't erase the past. It didn't make the scars vanish, but it made them easier to carry. They still had nightmares, they still had silences. But now they had coffee in the morning and laughter in the evening, a new quilt on the cot, books stacked in messy piles, the soft hum of a woman singing while soup simmered on the stove. They were not perfect, but they were whole. Some people think redemption is a thunderclap, a dramatic moment of salvation where everything broken suddenly heals. But most of the time it's quieter than that. It's someone who sees your pain and stays. It's warmth after too long in the cold. It's the hand that doesn't let go even when yours is shaking. Lila and Jesse didn't save each other with grand gestures. They saved each other with silence, with patience, with showing up every single day and saying, "I'm not leaving." And in a world that had taken so much from both of them, that was everything. So if you're out there feeling too broken, too late, too far, gone, remember this. You're not unworthy. You're not ruined. You just haven't found the hands that know how to hold you yet. And when you do, you'll know. Thanks for riding along with us on this journey of fire, frost, and healing. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that love isn't just about rescue, but restoration, then hit that like button, subscribe to Whispers of the Wild West, and comment below. What would your letter to your past self say? Until next time, ride, steady love, fiercely, and never forget. Even the hardest winters end in spring.